Grit and grace, that's how we grow. Step by step and child by child we know. There's power in the words we say. We lift the voices, light the way. Grit and grace, it's a journey we all share. For every child, everywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grit and Grace, a literacy journey. I'm your host, Gretchen Hanlin, and alongside me, I have my mother and co host, Angela Hanlin. The focus of today's episode is teacher clarity. I'm going to say that again, teacher clarity. I want you to take just a moment and think about, what does the phrase teacher clarity mean? Well, to put it quite simply, teacher clarity is when students receive clarity from their teacher. Today, my lovely mother and co host will explain to you exactly what teacher clarity is, why it is important, and how it can be achieved. We're also going to couple this topic with the importance of explicit instruction and how to design and deliver instruction in our classrooms. All right, here we go. Let's dive in, and I hope you have many aha moments while listening to today's episode. All right, as I previously mentioned, teacher clarity is when students receive clarity from their teacher. Mom, if you will, just please elaborate and tell us more about teacher clarity.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, especially when it's paired with explicit instruction. So I'm excited about this episode. But before I begin, I want to provide for the listeners right up front, instead of adding it on at the end, the resources that you and I will be using for today's discussion, so that they don't think that it's just Angie and Gretchen coming up with these ideas, because we always want our commitment to the listeners is to bring research and also evidence-based practices. So we're going to be taking all of our information from really where you and I gained our own information from. And it's 3 resources: the amazing book, Explicit Instruction by Dr. Anita Archer and Charles Hughes. The book It's Possible, the newly released book that I was able to co-author with Patty Montgomery. And then the Teacher Clarity Playbook, written by Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry. So as you and I quote things and say things, I want the listeners to know that that's really where we're coming. So I want to
Yes, and
begin by
I want to take a moment
yes.
and I want to point out that Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry helped author the Wonders curriculum. So if you're teaching the Wonders curriculum, a lot of this information should be able to apply directly to you, because the people who are saying, hey, this is what you need to be doing, also wrote the curriculum that you might be using. So it is set up for their work.
I'm not certain that Nancy is. I'll have to go back and check, but I know Doug Fisher is. I'm not certain about Nancy, but they've also been pivotal lately in all the Hattie information for visible learning that's coming out from Corwin. And so I know that people are very familiar with that, and also the phrase visible learning. So I feel like those are 2 of the leading authors in the Corwin work. So thanks for pointing that out before I got carried away with myself. Thanks, Gretchen. So the authors of the Teacher Clarity Playbook explain that a major part of teacher clarity is 2 things. 1, understanding what students need to learn. That's first. That's your starting point. Second, identifying how the students will know they learned it. I'm going to say this one more time. 1, understanding what students need to learn. And 2, identifying how they, the students, the learner, will know they learned it. So now enter 2 key phrases, 2 of my favorites. They are learning intentions and success criteria, because both of those contribute to teacher clarity. So to do this teacher clarity, teachers need to first look at and analyze their standards. I know you are so passionate about that work, so I'm very anxious for you to join in a little bit. And then secondly, plan using those standards, plan meaningful instruction, but also assessment. An assessment at the end of the lesson, quick check for comprehension to see if they have, like I said earlier, and number two, have the students learned it. But before we really get in here deep, I want to point out something that the planning, as we're planning the lesson, must be focused on impact on learning, our impact on the student learning. Our impact with our instruction is our instruction having an impact on the learning by the student. Not just have we taught it, check, but have the students learned it. So, in our mindset, as we're doing this, that really has to be the focus. So, the focus then should always be on whether or not our instruction has had an impact on student
Mhm.
learning. And one of my key things, and I think probably the favorite aspect that I've learned from Hattie's research, is to take the focus off of teaching and place it on the learning. So, in the very beginning, in the foreword that John Hattie writes for the book, The Teacher Clarity Playbook, he describes excellent teachers. So, I thought we could just have a really quick discussion on this before we go further. But he describes excellent teachers, and I'm either quoting or very closely quoting, paraphrasing here. He says, excellent teachers are those who have appropriately high expectations for their students, who share their notions of success criteria, how we will know if the students have successfully learned it. They will share that with their students. They then will ensure, I love the word ensure, that there is alignment between the lesson they've planned, the task the students do during that lesson, and then the assignment. They also, excellent teachers, ensure that the delivery of the lesson is relevant, accurate, and comprehensible to students, no matter what age we're teaching. They give worked examples. You are great at this. I've seen you do this to illustrate the degree of cognitive complexity desired from our students during this specific lesson. And then finally, excellent teachers provide welcome feedback to their
Mhm.
students. Specifically, we now know from Addie's research, the most important feedback is where to move next. Where to next? In your learning journey, where to next? So, this is what teacher clarity means throughout the book, Teacher Clarity Playbook. And when you asked me to describe it, I remember when I first heard it, teacher clarity. I thought, oh, so simple. So simple. Clarity by the teacher. I will have clarity as I teach. But when we really think about it, when learning is organized, when it is intentional, when it's purposeful, and when it's truly designed and explicit instruction, the design and the delivery, and when that student learner knows when he or she is learning, great things happen in the classroom for the
Mhm.
learner. So it isn't just for the teacher. It's not clarity for the teacher. It's truly clarity for the learner. And when teachers are clear in their expectations, when they're clear in their instruction, students learn more. And it
Yes.
really is that simple. So just to start off, that's my beginning explanation. Do you want to add anything?
Okay. No, not quite. I feel like you were really clear about that.
Thanks.
Okay, so then my next question is, why is teacher clarity important?
I think the main importance is, we all want our students to make growth. Every single year, we
Mhm.
want students to make growth. And we know from John Hattie, used to be the barometer, now it's the thermometer, the spectrum.
Yes.
But the zero point 0.4, that is 1 year's growth. Which is great because I think our bare minimum expectation, we should have high expectations. Bare minimum is that every child would make 1 year's growth, at least 1 year's growth. The problem with that though is in our classrooms now, students very seldom roll into our classroom at the start of the year, either
Right.
on grade level, above grade level, or super close to grade level. So the zero point 0.4, honestly, I don't think's enough. And if you can have an effect size that's so much higher, why don't we just do those?
Okay. So, yes, I literally just experienced this conversation a couple weeks ago. I was at a conference and we were in a breakout session. And so, I'm sitting with my small group teachers that, I did not know before this workshop started. And as we're sitting there, the presenter says, turn to someone close to you and tell them, like, what do you think is the effect size that you should always strive for? And I was like, oh, I know this, 0.75. And they were like, oh, okay, like you're confident in your answer. So then the presenter comes back and he was like 0.4. And so my table's looking at me like, oh, poor girl, she got it wrong. No, 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 no. I did not. And so I explained to them the next time we went to conversation, 0.4 is the minimum. If we can do better, why not do better? And like you said, exactly, we've got so many kids coming in with gaps that if it's not highly effective, why are you doing it? So like
Exactly.
personally in my classroom, if it's not 0.6 or higher,
Yeah.
I really don't have time for it.
Yeah. And as a principal and a superintendent, when I went in and the data, and as our team, we looked at the data and we had so many students not at grade level. Well,
Mhm.
I actually flipped Taddy's effect sizes and like, okay, if it's not a 0.6, 0.65 or higher, we aren't doing it. We're
We're
getting
not
rid of
doing
those
it. Yes.
practices. Yeah. So
So
teacher
I
clarity,
too,
oops, teacher clarity has an
you're
effect
okay.
size of 0.75. And if we can get that out of our students, then why would we not do that? And I feel like this is one that we absolutely have to have in our classrooms because the impact on learning with teacher clarity ensures that the impact on students' learning is significant and it's significantly greater than average. So I think as teachers, this is a practice that we absolutely have to understand, but also therefore implement. So do we want our students to learn during our lesson? And I think it's that simple. I think learning is the sole purpose of teaching. I don't think any of us just walk in like, okay, I've got this lesson to deliver. The sole
Mhm.
purpose of delivering that lesson is that learning will take place in the room. So we have to have teacher clarity for the learning to happen. It's critically important because when we boil it down, we should always want our students to be perfectly, abundantly clear in what it is they need to learn by the end of this lesson. And to clearly
Right.
say, hey, you're getting ready to learn. Again, put the focus on the learning and say, this is what I intend. Learning intention. This is what I intend for you to learn, not by the whole year, but right here by the end of this lesson. And I also feel that it is step one, truly step one for explicit instruction. Because we
Mhm.
know that explicit instruction has two parts. I always explain it to teachers with my hands, the design and the delivery, the design and the delivery. And the design of the lesson begins with determining what it is you want students to learn by the end of the lesson. And I've talked about so far Anita Archer and John Hattie and Doug Fisher, but in the book, It's Possible, Patty Montgomery, and I call that when Patty writes about it, she starts off and says, it's the big idea. And it's where that design piece starts. What do you want students to learn by the end of the lesson? And that's why I think it's so critically important. As teachers, we have to identify that when we're designing that lesson before we just start teaching. What is it that we want our students to learn by the end of
So I love Yes, I love delivering the lesson. I love teaching the lesson, but I get just really nerdy in the design. Like that is my thing. Planning the lesson, sitting down. Okay, this is my learning intention. How am I going to make it happen? What do I need to add to make sure that they've at least got the foundation for what it is I'm about to teach? And I just love putting in that time and that effort into the design. But I have so many teachers look at me like I'm crazy when I say that. When did
Yeah.
teachers stop making lesson plans? When did that happen?
I don't
I have
know. And
so
and
many
also, go ahead.
I have so many teachers that have said to me, "Oh, no, I don't I don't do that." What?
Yeah, I know. And the phrase that I want to throw out right here is that I had no idea you were going to say that, but this just came to me because it's one of my favorite phrases, and it's one of the things that was truly my takeaway from any of the time that I've been with Anita Archer. Any like mentoring and coaching and training I received from her is this: you cannot deliver an explicit lesson if you have not planned an explicit lesson. And when we take the time to plan and truly think out the entire lesson, what questions are we going to ask? When are we going to ask those questions? And then what responses are we wanting from our students? And if we don't get that level of response, what are we going to do?
Right.
What's our follow-up question? How are we going to dig and get that? That explicit plan. Then I realized once you put the time there, the delivery is so smooth.
So
And it makes
smooth.
it so much easier. And I, as a long time, did it incorrectly because I really spent, or maybe not incorrectly, let me change that. I don't want teachers to feel bad. Not as effectively. Let me say that. I
Mhm.
wasn't as effective at it because I so heavily was focused on the delivery. Was I going to use turn and talk? And if so, when? But, and thinking of those engagement strategies and how was I going to deliver it? Well, now I know that you design all of those things in there. Which questions are good ones for a turn and talk? Not just any old question, turn and talk, but when will I do a turn and talk? And at what point in the lesson? What question? I don't want them talking about just anything. What are the key things that I want brought out? And then I can have them talk about that because I want feedback from them. I want to be able to walk around the room on that level of question and see if they're getting it or not. And then give in the moment feedback as, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're either getting there or we aren't. So,
Yes.
and I do want to say, and we've said from the very beginning, and maybe we need to say this every time. From I first heard this said by Laura Stewart, the lovely, we both adore Stewart. But no blaming, no shaming zone. And I also add to that guilt-free zone. That when we know better, we do better. And so if you aren't deeply planning, I hope this changes that. But maybe it's just, teacher planning blocks and you just write a little. In working so closely with teachers over the past year, I've seen their quote unquote lesson plans be page numbers, and not even the word for word l- learning intention. Or maybe you're calling it learning objective, learning target, but that's not even written there word for word. And they definitely don't have always a success criteria written. But then, too, I think part of it is teachers kind of get in the habit of really turning the next page in the curriculum and just really teaching through the curriculum, but there still needs to be, or the reading program. I think sometimes we use curriculum for reading program. So
Mhm.
you have your curriculum, but you also have your state standards. What are the state standards saying? But then you do have, I hope, a a high quality reading resource. If not, you've got teachers though using products that they're making up and designing and they're pulling it, or they've got just a novel, or they don't have a strong reading program and they're kind of pulling these resources together. And then our point is, I think then the design of the lesson is even that much more critically important if you don't have that clear reading guide.
Okay, so, in the Revolutionary War, when Paul Revere was like, the British are coming, the British are coming. Okay, so at this moment, Gretchen Hanlin is going to say, an idea is coming, an idea is coming. Okay, so I had this idea the other day. I've shared it with a few people, and not everyone was enthusiastic because they said they were like, maybe it's a little too much work. Okay, well, I'm going to do it. And if anyone else is willing to do a little more work and would like to do it with me, that's fantastic. So here's my idea. If we want to be accountable, if we want to have teacher clarity, and if we want to make sure that we're truly like using and utilizing these practices with the high effect size in your lesson plan, add a little section. Put the practice that you're using in the effect size next to it. If we are collecting data on student performance, let's, for yourself, let's collect some data on what practices I'm using to get to that level of student performance. It's going to take like 5 seconds, guys. And in your lesson plan, you just go and you put, today I'm doing a jigsaw. Well, here's the effect size of a jigsaw. I do too.
I love it. And I tell you what. Okay, so I had no idea you were going to say that because I love that we don't talk about this before we just dive in. But think of the impact that that's going to have in a data meeting.
Yes.
Because then you can say, all right, so here's what I tried. And then two, this is the type of collaboration that we need in our schools. We have teachers collaborating, but I don't know that they're always collaborating and getting an effect size. And that's where Patty and I write about in It's Possible, building the system of collaboration. And what is it that we're having teachers collaborate on? Are we just saying, okay, well, we know teachers need to collaborate, so here's your collaboration schedule, who you will collaborate with and where you will meet and the time of day and the date and time it's going to take place. But so often leaders fail to give an expectation for that, an outcome. What do we want? The purpose. What is it that we're having teachers collaborate on? And I tell you what, teacher clarity, creating those learning intentions, writing them together, looking at the standards, breaking the standards down, analyzing what is a high quality learning intention based on this. What then would be high quality success criteria? What would we use to determine whether or not the students have successfully learned it? I can't think of any better type of collaboration for teachers to be doing. And then coming back together, collaborating on, okay, we tried this. And I love when you like identify what strategy, what instructional practice you're using, and then saying, you know what? Did we get an effect size? Did the learning have an impact? I'm sorry, did our instruction have an impact on student learning? Did it move the dial? Because if not, then what are we going to do? How can we tweak it? How can we modify it? I love that.
So I just want everyone to take a moment. We've given you a lot of information. So take a moment to just kind of soak it in. And I want you to just, like I said, take a moment, soak it in. Okay, we've talked about what teacher clarity is. It's when students receive clarity from their teacher. What are they going to be learning? How are they going to learn it? Okay, we've also covered.
How are they going to know they learned it? What is the criteria that the teacher is going to judge the success of? And the students need to know that before the lesson ever begins. At the very beginning of the lesson, we need to tell them, here's the intention, here's what I intend for you to learn. And this is how we will know that you learned it. Not just I, but we will know. We're group learners together, and this is how we'll know if you've learned it. This is how you, the student, will know if you've learned it or not.
Okay, Mother, come off of the soapbox. I'm giving people a moment to breathe here.
Okay, go ahead. You go back to letting them breathe. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll take a deep breath then. Go ahead.
And then we've also talked about why teacher clarity is important. So now I know I personally, and I know other teachers that feel the same way, when you go to professional development and, research has just been spewed at you, but you don't leave with, how do I go and do this in my classroom? You've wasted your time and your school district has wasted money. That's why we want to be different at Grit and Grace. So, like I said, we've told you what teacher clarity is, we've told you why it is important. Now, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of today's episode. How can teacher clarity be achieved? What can you go and do in your classroom today or tomorrow to make this happen?
Well, first, you've got to be familiar with your standards. You simply have to. As a principal and a superintendent, I always loved when, and it was an expectation, as principal, but that your standards are right there on top of your desk. TOK chart, like it's right there. Like you're looking at those things. It's right there
Yes.
as you're planning. I also liked Scarborough's rope, like right there. Like what part of
Mhm.
that's a whole separate
Okay. So,
um
for those of you
conversation,
who
but
are
I've got to.
watching, for those of you who are watching on YouTube and can see, I'm going to leave the room for just a moment. I've got to grab something and then I will be right back. Mother, go ahead. Keep talking. You're doing wonderful.
Okay. So one of my things about professional development that I always say to teachers is that so often we sit through a professional development session, but we haven't truly been professionally developed. So my statement is this: if we leave a professional development session, and I always own this as a learner, I'm sorry, as a leader, but if our teachers leave a professional development session and they don't know how to go implement that in their rooms, I don't believe they've been professionally developed. I don't believe I was professionally developed without that. And as a leader, I don't feel that I was professionally developing individuals. So I always wanted to get to the how. So, all right, how do we do this? I have found the following steps to be critically important. And this is what this looks like in a classroom. Learning intentions. Learning intentions, and whether you call those learning objectives, learning targets, I want to say I've called those learning targets, I've called those objectives. I felt students could really connect and resonate with the word objective. They didn't really have that visual. And when you're like, if you ask them, what does an objective mean? I couldn't even get my fifth graders to really explain that back to me. Even middle school kids are like, I don't know. She calls it that. But target, that was a little bit more because like bullseye target. But I have found personally that when you say learning intention, what I intend for you to learn, I'm not saying everyone has to change it, but I have just found from my personal experience that is when it truly resonates with the learner. So, learning intentions, those can be written in an I can statement. Those can be written, students will be able to. Learners will, I love putting it on. Learners will learn to. And then part of the wording can come from the standard. We don't put the whole standard up there though, because
Mhm.
that standard is a level of mastery. That's something we want the students to know by the end of the year. And those are too wordy and far too much for just one individual lesson. So then we really put it in a student friendly term. What is it that you want students to learn, not do? The learning intention is what we want them to learn by the end of the lesson. And I really want you, when you think about learning intention, to think what we want them to learn or know by the end of the lesson. Now, it should always be posted, okay, near the beginning of the lesson. But I'm seeing a lot of teachers post it and kind of walk away from it. Like,
Mhm.
okay, I've posted it. I've been told to post it. It's building expectation, kind of that compliance. Check, it's up there. But then I'll come in and they won't be teaching to that objective, of that learning intention or that objective. Or it might even be like one from a previous lesson. And that's more that compliance. I've kind of slapped it up and forgot it. So it needs to be posted, but then immediately share. Share it
Yes.
with the students. They are the learner. I like to get them reading it with me. If they're readers, read it to me. Now listen as I reread it to you, or I read it once, you read it with me. Just have the students engage. It's their learning intention. Embrace it, read it, not just you read it to them. Get them reading it or echo reading it or something. And then we can't stop there that we've posted it and shared it. as we teach, as we're providing the instruction, continuously remind them, hey, this is our learning intention. Go back to it, refer to it multiple times during the lesson. And always, 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 and this I feel is the thing that I most often miss or don't see, share the relevance. Because our
Right.
brain and that child's brain is wanting to know, why is this important? Why does this matter? Why do I need to know this? Where am I going to use it? Share the relevance of the learning intention. When will you need it? How are you going to use it? If you can do a real world application, share that. But tell them, why does this learning matter? Why is this important? When will you use
And
it again? When will you see it again? Share the relevance of it. Did you
if
want to
you
add?
have a focus board in your classroom where you have your learning intention, your success criteria, your spelling words, your vocabulary words, just kind of your focus for the week, I think we need to add the relevance to that focus board. Have a little section. Why is this relevant? And just, it
It's
doesn't
important.
have to be a paragraph, just a quick blurb. You don't even have to write it down. You can point and say, okay, we're going to talk about why this is relevant. Here's why this is relevant. Today, we're talking about area and perimeter of rectangles. Well, if you're ever going to build a garden, in your backyard, you're going to need to understand the area and the perimeter of the rectangular garden bed that you are going to build.
Yes,
It can be that simple.
it can. And then when are you going to use it?
Mhm.
Is it in an upcoming lesson? Is this a lifelong skill? Fluency, vocabulary. We need to be strengthening that all the time. And it is so
Yes.
relevant in literacy. So why does it matter? But then once that's done, and this sounds so simple, and I find it difficult when I'm really watching lessons, but ensure that your instruction aligns with that learning intention. Because I
Mhm.
see it often start well, and then it just goes, and then we start throwing all these things in. If that's confusing to me, someone who's in the room observing to coach and support teachers, okay, if I'm the building leader, if I'm an instructional coach, whatever, and now in my work, like if I'm in there to give feedback to the teachers during my coaching and supporting of them, if that's unclear to me, think about what that does to the brain of a student, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, middle school student, high school student. That instruction then must be designed to align with that learning intention. And always, 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 it must be based on the student.
Right.
And I think one of the things that teachers get overwhelmed with is that if they do have a core reading program, so often they have 6. Okay, but in this next 20 to 30 minutes, like in whole group, or this next section of a lesson, what is it that I want them to learn? And I think one overarching for your reading block. I don't have to have all 6 up there because I want to really choose my priority one for that lesson, what it is I want them to learn by the end of the lesson. And then I'm going to then look at my success criteria. So, what does that look like? How do we do this as a teacher? Well, these always need to be written in I can statements or we can. Gretchen asked me, so why is that, Mother?
Why is that, Mother?
Because then at the end, when it's time to do that check for comprehension and assess whether or not they've learned it, we say, if it's an I can't statement, we again go back to it. I'm going to get to this in a second, but then we read it again with them and then say, okay, can you? Can we? It's so great then to ask that question. And that is so clear for the student to understand. And it
Mhm.
resonates with them. So again, the success criteria should be posted. It should also be shared at the beginning of the lesson, but also referred to during the lesson. So when we've done something, okay, when we've done something with a student, let's say our learning intention is about learning new vocabulary words. When we've done those, when I've explicitly given the word, clapped out the word in syllables, and they've done all the echoing with me, they're part of our focus wall. And then I've given the student-friendly definition. Students have echoed, and I've done all of that explicit vocabulary section. When I'm done, I go right back and refer to that learning intention. Remember, these are the keywords that we are learning for today that we'll be working on this week. And maybe that learning intention is going to be up for a few days because we're going to be
Mhm.
working on this for a few days. But both learning intention and success criteria referred to multiple times during the lesson. Why? Because it helps reinforce for the student, oh, yeah, I'm learning this. Oh, yeah, I need to be assessing right now whether or not I'm learning this. And again,
Right.
oh my goodness, it helps with the practice of creating an assessment capable learner because as they're
Right.
going, they can be giving you that whether or not they feel they're learning it. But the success criteria has one difference from the learning intention, and that is it must be assessed at the end of the lesson. Did they learn it? And it's not did they master something by the end of the year? But that learning intention, did they learn it? And if not, how close are they to the learning?
Right.
Because that then tells us where we go in our next lesson. If they didn't learn it, reteaching is it. If they
Hmm.
did learn it, what are we going to do next? If I've got some that learned it and not everyone there, what am I going to do? Well, here's the beauty of if it's a whole group, I can then pick that up and I can drill right back down into it.
Yes. So, one thing that I want to point out, we've talked about the importance of posting that learning intention and success criteria and then referring back. I'm old school. I like to have the good old fashioned focus board on a bulletin board
Me
in
too.
my
Me
room.
too.
So that, or even if it's not necessarily a bulletin board, but it's a whiteboard, I always have everything written out. So then it never leaves. It's always there and I can always refer right back to it. A lot of people are utilizing technology in the classroom and they say, well, I want to put it on a slide in a slideshow. Okay, but I ask that you have it on more than one slide in that slideshow.
Yes.
So have it on your first one, have it on your third one. Okay, so in the previous slide, we talked about this. Once again, here's that learning intention. This is why we are moving forward. This is how this relates to what we just did. So just always make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to refer back to the learning intention and to the success criteria. So when
I
I
want to
stepped
add two
out,
things. Can I add two things
okay,
quickly about
oh,
that, what you just
absolutely.
said? So, one is when I am training leaders right now in my professional development sessions, I have that learning intention slide. It keeps coming back. It keeps coming back throughout the slide to remember them. And I will do, okay, so how are you now? How are you feeling? I love too that check for comprehension that we got from Sarah. Muddy, buggy, clear. How are you on this one right now? And do those mini checks. I had a high school teacher share a great idea when I was a superintendent to do a text box in the upper right corner of the slide. And even throughout my slideshow, he taught with slides. But even throughout, the learning intention and success criteria were right there in the top right hand corner of the slide. And the students could see it on every slide, no matter where they were in the slide presentation. It was right there as that visual
Yes.
reminder. And then, too, the teacher said it was kind of that reminder for him as well. Hey, refer to that. Keep referring to it.
Mhm.
Okay, you stepped out. I
Yes.
think that's where you were going to go
Okay.
next.
So when I stepped out a moment ago, I grabbed you can call it my lesson planning Bible. You can call it my lesson planning roadmap, whatever you want to call it. I'll say I haven't necessarily done this every year. I've always, had my standards available and I've always been ready to look back at them. The DOK chart it may as well just be pinned to my shirt. Like I have to have one with me at all times. But I found recently the best way for me to keep track of it is in a binder. So I have my binder, and on the front, it simply says lesson plan and standards, and then the school year that I'm going to be working in. On
Are
the
you
back side of the
I'm
binder,
sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Are you all ready? You're already getting ready for next year?
yes,
Oh my
girl.
God. I
Yes.
just I love you so much. Carry on, carry on.
Okay. And so then on the back of my binder, I have the district calendar for the upcoming school year. So that way, when I'm lesson planning, I can just quickly turn to the back of the binder and see, okay, you know, do we happen to have this day off? Or how many days are we going to be in school for this unit? Are they consecutive days? Do we have a break somewhere in there? Okay, so then when I open my binder, the very first thing I have is the DOK level. The DOK level is your guide to understanding your standards, because often these verbs are in your standard. And so then I go and I find the verb on the chart and I see what level of understanding is that standard asking for. Is it a simple level 1 recall, or is it level 4 extended thinking? And then that kind of guides the activities that we're going to
Yeah.
choose. So, for example, level 1 recall, you're not writing an essay. That's probably going to be for your strategic thinking or your extended thinking. But anyway, so I start with my DOK chart. Then I move, and the next thing I see, I have in my district, we have a standard progression of writing that we're really working on this year. So I have that printed off to see what each grade's target standard is going to be for writing. And so I'll be teaching 4th grade this year. So I've got my grade 4 highlighted. Okay, and then finally, here we go. This is where I get real nerdy. I've got my ELA standards. Okay, I've gone through and I have annotated, I have analyzed each standard. I've circled the verbs, I've underlined. So, for example, this first one is know and apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills in decoding words. I have know and apply circled because those are the things the students have to do. Okay, what do they have to know and apply? So I've underlined grade level phonics, word analysis skills. What's the context? I've underlined the context in decoding words. That is where I'm doing this. I'm going to know and apply my grade level phonics and word analysis skills when I am decoding words. Okay? I know that this podcast is called Grit and Grace, a Literacy Journey, but guess what? If I go to my next tab, there are those beautiful math standards. And once again, same thing. I've gone in, I've analyzed, I've annotated. Why have I done that? Say, Gretchen, why have you done that?
Okay, Gretchen, why have you done that?
Because if I've gone in and if I have annotated, if I have analyzed those standards, my success criteria is seamless. Okay? So we've talked about what is teacher clarity? Why is teacher clarity important? Now, how can teacher clarity be achieved? So I've shown you just kind of my guide for how I keep those standards fresh in my mind, how I keep them organized. At this point, I'm going to give you a few examples. I've taken some standards, I've created a learning intention and success criteria for those standards. Okay, so I'm going to start. Got a little bit of scrolling to do.
While you're saying
Okay,
that, can I point out something while you're scrolling? Can I point out something that I
absolutely.
failed to say about success criteria? And I think it is super important when teachers are doing it. I love for the learning intention to be written out and annotate that. Circle the
Yes.
word. Like, are you going to explain? Are you going to identify what is it that I want you to be able to, what is it that I want you to learn? What is it that I want you and the success criteria, how I know that you've learned it. But I actually like go in and teach teachers to annotate that learning intention, break it down, explain it to them as you're going through it. Like actually write on it. I mean, I love it. You know this and you do too. We love it on a dry erase board so that we can do that. or if teachers are
Yes.
teaching right there with an anchor chart or something like that. But on the success criteria, I love to put just a box, because then when they go through that, they check that off. And you always did that
Mhm.
beautifully.
We'll
Beautifully.
come back to that when we talk about how we, use teacher clarity to make learning visible. That I
Okay.
do want to
Oh,
talk
that's, oh,
about
yeah.
that
Beautiful.
process.
Yeah. Okay. Go
Yes.
ahead.
Okay. So right now to the learning intention and success criteria examples. Okay. So when writing learning intentions and success criteria, they must be based on standards. I'm going to say that again because it's important. When writing learning intentions and success criteria, they must be based on standards.
Not
All
word for
right.
word, though.
My first.
Not word for word, just based on it. I know you're going there. Sorry. I see you giving me that look, but in my body, I feel compelled to say that, not word for word. It's too wordy for a student. Okay, carry on. And I won't interrupt again.
Okay.
Carry on.
All right. So here's my standard. Locate and refer to relevant details and evidence when explaining what a text says explicitly, implicitly, and make logical inferences. Okay, that is my standard. Here is the learning intention that I have created based on that standard. The students will be able to use text evidence to support inferences. Okay, so that is my learning intention. The students will be able to use text evidence to support inferences. Here are my success criteria. I can make inferences. I can underline information in the text to support my inferences. I can cite information from the text to support my inferences. Okay? All
Very
right.
good.
Now, thank you. Moving on, here's another example. This time, my standard is determine the meaning of words, phrases, figurative language, academic, and content specific words within a text. All right, here's my learning intention. The students will be able to determine the meaning of figurative language within a text. That standard has a lot of different words in it words, phrases, figurative language. In this lesson that I'm imagining in my mind, I'm only focusing on figurative language. So I'm going to read that learning intention again. The students will be able to determine the meaning of figurative language within a text. Now, here's my success criteria. Here's what we have to do to make that happen. I can identify examples of figurative language. I can identify the type of figurative language being used in the text. I can use context to determine the meaning of figurative language in the text. So, for just a moment, I'm going to kind of give you a think aloud. What was I thinking as I came up with these success criteria? Okay, once again, my learning intention. The students will be able to determine the meaning of figurative language within a text. Okay, if I'm going to determine the meaning of figurative language, if I'm going to figure out what the figurative language means, one, I have to be able, when I'm reading a text, to stop and go, "Ooh, there was some figurative language in that sentence." Okay, so I've identified the figurative language. Now, what type of figurative language? Is it a simile? Is it a metaphor? Is it personification? And then I use that to use context and determine the meaning of the figurative language. So I, one, have to recognize that I've just read an example of figurative language. Two, what type of figurative language is it? Three, what does it mean within the text? Okay, once again, I know that this podcast is called Grit and Grace, a literacy journey, but you should have teacher clarity in every single subject that you teach. I personally believe it's easier to have teacher clarity in math because it's a little bit more cut and dry. All
I
right, so I
agree.
gave you a math example too. All right, here's my standard. Apply the area and perimeter formulas for rectangles in real world and mathematical problems. All right, here's my learning intention. The students will be able to apply area and perimeter formulas for rectangles to solve problems. I'm going to say that again, my learning intention. The students will be able to apply area and perimeter formulas for rectangles to solve problems. All right, my success criteria. I can write the area formula for rectangles. I can write the perimeter formula for rectangles. I can distinguish when to use the area and perimeter formulas for rectangles. I can solve problems using the area and perimeter formulas for rectangles. Okay, so in my learning intention and in my standard, it said apply area and perimeter formulas. Well, if I'm going to apply those formulas, I need to know what they are. So the very first thing I'm going to do at the beginning of this lesson, on the whiteboard, on the top of your paper, everyone write the area formula for rectangles. Okay, if they can do that, give yourself a check at the top of your page. I'm walking back to my focus board. Okay, we just accomplished success criteria number 1. You are able to write the formula for rectangles. You have to be able to do that to be successful in this lesson. Now, we just wrote the area formula for rectangles. Again, on your whiteboard, on the top of your paper, whatever you're using, write the perimeter formula for rectangles. Everyone does that. I go around, I do a quick check, I have someone share it out loud. Back to the success criteria. Okay, congratulations. You just were able to prove to me that you know the perimeter formula for rectangles. Now that we know our formulas, let's look at some problems and let's distinguish, when am I solving for area? When am I solving for perimeter? If you have a worksheet, that can simply be, you're going to read through each question as a class, and you're going to circle or you're going to underline, okay, which formula am I going to use? And then maybe you write that formula beside the problem. Okay, once again, we're going to go back to the success criteria. What did we just do? We just were able to distinguish. We were just able to decide, when are we using the area formula? When are we using the perimeter formula? Finally, I have given you a beautiful launch pad. We're going to go back and you're going to try on your own. You're going to solve these problems using the area and perimeter formulas for rectangles. Okay, so I know that was a lot. Everyone just take a deep breath. Okay, I want to make one clarification. I want to make something apparent. You'll notice when I gave my learning intention was always the students will be able to. My success criteria, that's where I had my I can statements. I have personally found if your learning intention is I can, and then your success criteria is I can, well, you've really damaged your clarity, because what is the difference between the learning intention and the success criteria? They're all I can statements. So that's why I choose for my learning intention to be the students will be able to, because then you're addressing that group as a whole. But your success criteria is, I don't care what my neighbor next to me can do. Can I write this formula? Can I identify the type of figurative language? So my learning intention is always broad, the whole. And then the success criteria, I really drill down. Where are you? What can you do? All right. So now we're moving into, how does teacher clarity make learning visible? As my mother previously mentioned, when I taught high school, on my board, I had my learning intention and my success criteria. Before each success criteria, I just had a little square. When my kids came into the room, they knew, they pulled out their learning intention and success criteria notebook, and every single day they wrote down the learning intention, the success criteria. Throughout the lesson, or at the end of the lesson, depending on what we were doing, they would go back and they would reflect. If they knew that they had met that success criteria, they gave themselves a check mark. So what have I done? I've provided teacher clarity, huge effect size. I've had the students go back and reflect on their learning. Again, great effect size. And now I've moved into those questions that John Hattie poses. Where am I? Okay, so where am I in the success criteria? Now that I've mastered these things, where am I going? And how will I get there? So that is why at the end of our lessons, we always want to kind of give a hint, a sneak peek at what we're doing in the following lesson. Okay, so today you've met this success criteria. Now, here's our next step, and here's how we're going to get there.
Absolutely beautiful. Beautiful. I want to give you some feedback. Oh my gosh. One, everything you said was so explicit. And as you're doing that, I'm thinking about imagining you in the classroom, and it was so explicit. It was explicit to the learners listening, but it's then so explicit and clear to the students. The other thing that you did there, and again, I did not know how you were going to do that or anything, but the standard itself, I'm glad you provided it because they are often so broad, much too
Yes.
broad for one specific lesson. You did a lovely job of picking out the starting points. And what you were doing in so many of those with those success criteria, you were moving, sorry, from simple to complex, which is not just explicit
Simple. Yes.
instruction.
Mhm.
That is systematic instruction. When you held up that planning binder and all of that, there you're talking about the systematic, that blueprint for how we're going to go. But we move from simple to complex. And your success criteria did a lovely job of doing that because you're right. To be able to determine the meaning of figurative language, I first have to be able to identify it.
Right.
Can I even identify figurative language? And that's that scaffolding that we do of like, okay, and we take them from where they are to that high expectation of the learning intention. I loved when you did the think aloud. Again, is an explicit instruction technique, giving that think aloud. It was just lovely.
Well, thank you,
My
Mother.
heart is
I appreciate it.
just so it was
Well,
absolutely lovely.
I want to say something else. Success criteria is pretty new. I've been teaching for, I'm going into year 6. And at the beginning, the focus was really just have your, we called them objectives at the time,
Yeah.
have your objective posted. And then we changed the language to learning target. But now I'm at learning intention. And with learning intention came success criteria. But not everyone's there yet. Not every school district knows what success criteria is. And so then if they don't know what success criteria is, they're really not asking their teachers to provide it. So
Right.
here's the thing. Be brave. Do it anyway, because here's the thing. If someone comes in and sees, oh, what's this that you have posted? Are you going to be in trouble for making the learning more clear? Is that really going to be a problem? And if they say, well, your learning intention has to be an I can statement, just say, why? What's your reasoning behind that? Can I do it like this and keep track of my data? And if it works, I'll keep doing it. If not, I'll do it your way, sure. But can I just try it? My thing is you don't always have to ask for permission, just kind of ask for forgiveness later. If you know it's going to be effective and you know it's going to work.
Yeah. All right. So you had asked then, what's the question you had asked?
Oh, how does teacher clarity make learning visible?
Okay. So visible learning, thing I've loved about it, it not only makes it visible, you can see it, you can see the learning, you can hear it, and you can feel it. Like there's
Yes.
a feeling, and the students are feeling that they have learned it. So teacher clarity, it truly is, I lost my point for a second, but it truly then when you get to the success criteria part of it. Okay, so here's my learning intention. This is what you're expected to know. This is what I want you to learn by the end of the lesson. Well, to make learning visible, that's success criteria. The success criteria is I learned it. I could do
Yes.
that. And the learning then becomes visible, not just to us, the teacher, but to the learner themselves. I learned it. And I just don't think there's any better feeling in a classroom than to know that learning is taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really gives students that I learned it, that feeling of I learned it. And that's why I think it helps make it visible. And two, that's why I like that question mark. I'm sorry, that checkbox by the success criteria. It makes it visible. Check. And then if I am a building leader walking in, and I'm coming in at the middle to the end of the lesson, I can already look, you've already got one or two check marks checked off. I know that learning's taken place in that lesson. And that is one thing.
Yes.
I think by posting it, by students seeing it, by referring to it, by clearly saying, look, this is why we're doing this. Our intention is adding and subtracting fractions. What have we just done? I modeled for you two problems of what? Adding and subtracting fractions. Now we're going to guided practice. We're going to do it together. Oh my gosh, we've done that. Look back at the learning attention. What have we just done? It makes the learning visible. It also makes why we're even doing the learning visible to the students and explicit. But that success criteria really brings it home. We've talked a lot about the
Mm-hmm.
relevance. We start with the learning intention, what we intend for the students to learn, and the success criteria, what we want them to be able to do to show that they've truly learned it by the end of the lesson. The relevance, that's the motivation to take the kids there. That
Mm-hmm.
relevance, that's that motivation. Why does this matter? When am I going to use it? Why do I have to know it? That's that relevance to take the student to the success criteria. And how does it make it visible? What you were saying, having the students reflect at the end. Having the students
Yes.
reflect, that brings it so visible to them. And then giving them invisible learning, giving them that next step. Then they see it. Okay, this was today. And in the beginning, reviewing what you learned yesterday. Here's today's intention, what we intend for you to learn. Here's what we've learned by today's lesson. And then the next step, this is where we're going next with learning. It truly makes that progression of learning, that learning journey visible to the student. Do you want to add to that?
Um, so I just want to make a point that when you write that learning intention, and when that learning intention stays up on your focus board or on your whiteboard all day, in your early childhood classrooms, you're exposing the kids to words because kids look around the room, especially like, I know that they might not be able to read the entire learning intention, but good Lord, in kindergarten and first grade, you in almost every single objective or learning intention that you post, you've got the word to and for. Those are their, whatever you call them, sight words, high frequency words, heart words. How wonderful would it be if they just looked at that board and was like, oh, I know that word. So just
Yeah.
by writing it, just by posting it, you're also exposing those kids to written words.
Yeah, that makes it visible. And I remember when
Mhm.
I first learned about this, it was from Dr. Vicki Gibson, and I asked her to that. I taught fifth grade at the time. I had always taught grades 3, 4, 5. Writing it was a no-brainer for me because I knew my students could
Mhm.
read it. But I asked her, "Do you write it for the young?" Yes. And I've seen you write
Yes.
it for 4K and first grade. And the thing is, they do start picking that up, but they're going to hear you read it. But to make the students grab on to that, it's their learning and it's for them. Have them read it, or in those lower grades, have them echo. But I really want to kind of
Mhm.
wrap this up that question that you threw out on how does it become visible to the students. So I want to go back to make and really drill down on how it makes it visible for each of these. Okay, so Visible learning's core idea is that visible learning is about making learning visible for two people, both the teacher and the students. So, for learning to be visible, students need to know one, what they're learning, why they are learning it, and how to know they've learned it. Okay, let me say those one more time. What they are learning, learning intention, why they are learning it, relevance, and how to know they've learned it, the success criteria. That So the core idea of visible learning, those three things, well, there you go. There's your learning intention, your relevance, and also your success criteria. Teacher clarity. It's a high impact strategy. We know it's got an effect size of 0.75, but it includes clarity around the learning intention, clarity with the success criteria, clarity with your instruction, the design of your lesson and the instruction that you'll be providing, and also clarity in how you're going to assess them at the end of the learning. And when you explain that to the student, they then understand this is why I've got this check for comprehension. This is why I have this exit ticket. And when teachers are clear in that, students then are not only more likely to engage and take ownership of their learning, but they'll also see that they've learned it. So learning intentions and success criteria, that's the how of the teacher clarity. That's how we provide the teacher clarity and make it clear and visible to our students. So John Hattie emphasizes that clarity comes from explicitly stating the learning intention, what the students are expected to learn, success criteria, how the students and teachers will know that they've met the intention. And when we do these make learning visible because students understand the purpose of the lesson, the why. They have that target, that success criteria to aim for. They've got that visible end of, okay, this is where we're going. And as you're checking for comprehension along the way, they then can monitor their progress. They can explain when they don't get it. They can explain and state when they have questions. And as they're monitoring their progress, it makes their learning visible. Wait, I know more than I knew a few minutes ago. When the teacher re
Mhm.
explained, I know more now. Again, more about the visibility, but also making learning visible empowers the student. Because when students know those questions that you referred to, those three just a minute ago, where am I? Where am I going? What's my next step to get there? Or how close am I to reaching that goal? When students know, what am I learning today? Learning intention. Why am I learning this? The relevance. And how will I know they've learned it? The learning becomes very visible. But then they're also able to be active participants. I know you're going to love this. Rather than a passive recipient or just this kind of obedient student when teacher says engage, she says it, I echo, but they're truly engaged in the content. They're an active participant in their own learning, in the instruction. And I think all of that leads to making the learning visible because the students are taking ownership of their learning. Teacher clarity, the learning intentions, and success criteria, those are the tools that not only make learning possible, they also make learning visible.
Yes.
So,
Okay. Well, there it is. Teacher clarity, what it is, how you can achieve teacher clarity, why it is important, and how teacher clarity makes learning visible. All right, we have enjoyed our time here with you today. And I hope that you are enjoying your summer break. If you're teaching summer school, you are a brave, brave soul. Good for you. But anyway, I hope you're taking time to rest, relax, prepare for the school year. And if you feel in the mood to do some work for the upcoming school year, I highly suggest start with those standards. Go through, break them down, see what did the standards truly mean and what are they truly asking. All right, well,
and we hope that a key takeaway for all teachers today is that When students know what they're learning attention, and how to be successful on that learning, the criteria, and teachers communicate that clearly and consistently, then learning becomes more purposeful, more focused, and effective. And I don't think there's a teacher out there that doesn't want to be highly effective. This is one of the ways to do that, to be highly effective. So,
Absolutely.
thanks, Gretchen. Thanks for guiding the discussion and all your beautiful input today. I enjoyed this one. Did you enjoy this
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to
one?
talk about.
Me too.
So, all right. Well, we can't wait to be back with you next time. I'd like to remind you that Grit and Grace, a literacy journey, is an Angela Hanlin and Associates production. Bye, y'all.
Grit and grace, that's how we grow. Step by step and child by child we know. There's power in the words we say. We lift the voices light the way. Grit and grace, it's a journey we all share. For every child,